Test 2. This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a woman calling a tourist information office to ask about a festival. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good morning. You're through to the Tourist Information Office. Tim speaking. How can I help you?
Oh, hello. Could you give me some information about next month's festival, please? My family and I will be staying in the town that week.
Of course. Well, it starts with a concert on the afternoon of the 17th.
Oh, I heard about that. The orchestra and singers come from the USA, don't they?
They're from Canada. They're very popular over there. They're going to perform a number of well-known pieces that will appeal to children as well as adults.
That sounds good. My whole family are interested in music.
The next day, the 18th, there's a performance by a ballet company called Eustatis.
Sorry?
The name is spelled Eustatis. They appeared in last year's festival and went down very well. Again, their programme is designed for all ages.
Good. I expect we'll go to that. I hope there's going to be a play during the festival. A comedy, ideally.
You're in luck. On the 19th and 20th, a local amateur group are performing one written by a member of the group. It's called Jemima. That'll be on in the town hall. They've already performed it 2 or 3 times. I haven't seen it myself, but the review in the local paper was very good.
And is it suitable for children?
Yes. In fact, it's aimed more at children than at adults. So both performances are in the afternoon.
And what about dance? Will there be any performances?
Yes, also on the 20th, but in the evening. A professional company is putting on a show of modern pieces with electronic music by young composers.
Uh-huh.
The show is about how people communicate, or fail to communicate with each other, so it's got the rather strange name, Chat.
I suppose that's because that's something we do both face-to-face and online.
That's right.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Now, there are also some workshops and other activities. They'll all take place at least once every day, so everyone who wants to take part will have a chance.
Good. We're particularly interested in cookery. You don't happen to have a cookery workshop, do you?
We certainly do. It's going to focus on how to make food part of a healthy lifestyle. And it'll show that even sweet things like cakes can contain much less sugar than they usually do.
that might be worth going to. We're trying to encourage our children to cook.
Another workshop is just for children, and that's on creating posters to reflect the history of the town. The aim is to make children aware of how both the town and people's lives have changed over the centuries. The results will be exhibited in the community centre. Then, the other workshop is in toy making, and that's for adults only.
Oh, why's that?
Because it involves carpentry. Participants will be making toys out of wood, so there'll be a lot of sharp chisels and other tools around.
It makes sense to keep children away from it.
Exactly. Now, let me tell you about some of the outdoor activities. There'll be supervised wild swimming.
Wild swimming? What's that?
It just means swimming in natural waters, rather than a swimming pool.
Oh, okay. In a lake, for instance.
Yes, there's a beautiful one just outside the town, and that'll be the venue for the swimming. There'll be lifeguards on duty, so it's suitable for all ages. And finally, there'll be a walk in some nearby woods every day. The leader is an expert on insects. He'll show some that live in the woods and how important they are for the environment. So there are going to be all sorts of different things to do during the festival.
There certainly are.
If you'd like to read about how the preparations for the festival are going, the festival organizer is keeping a blog. Just search online for the festival website, and you'll find it.
Well, thank you very much for all the information.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That is the end of part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 1. Part 2. You will hear the chair of a committee on park facilities addressing her local town council about changes that have been made to the park. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
As chair of the Town Council Subcommittee on Park Facilities, I'd like to bring you up to date on some of the changes that have been made recently to the Croft Valley Park. So if you could just take a look at the map I handed out, let's begin with a general overview. So, the basic arrangement of the park hasn't changed. It still has 2 gates, north and south, and a lake in the middle. The cafe continues to serve an assortment of drinks and snacks, and is still in the same place, looking out over the lake and next to the old museum. We're hoping to change the location of the toilets and bring them nearer to the centre of the park, as they're a bit out of the way at present, near the adventure playground, in the corner of your map. The formal gardens have been replanted and should be at their best in a month or 2. They used to be behind the old museum, but we've now used the space near the south gate, between the park boundary and the path that goes past the lake towards the old museum. We have a new outdoor gym for adults and children, which is already proving very popular. It's by the glass houses, just to the right of the path from the south gate. You have to look for it, as it's a bit hidden in the trees. One very successful introduction has been our skateboard ramp. It's in constant use during the evenings and holidays. It's near the old museum, at the end of a little path that leads off from the main path between the lake and the museum. We've also introduced a new area for wildflowers to attract bees and butterflies. It's on a bend in the path that goes round the east side of the lake, just south of the adventure playground.
Before you hear the rest of the presentation, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, let me tell you a bit more about some of the changes to Croft Valley Park. One of our most exciting developments has been the adventure playground. We were aware that we had nowhere for children to let off steam and decided to use our available funds to set up a completely new facility in a large space to the north of the park. It's open year-round, though it closes early in the winter months, and entrance is completely free. Children can choose whatever activities they want to do, irrespective of their age. But we do ask adults not to leave them on their own there. There are plenty of seats where parents can relax and keep an eye on their children at the same time. Lastly, the glass houses. A huge amount of work has been done on them to repair the damage following the disastrous fire that recently destroyed their western side. Over £80,000 was spent on replacing the glass walls and the metal supports, as well as the plants that had been destroyed, although, unfortunately, the collection of tropical palm trees has proved too expensive to replace up to now. At present, the glass houses are open from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Mondays to Thursdays, and it's hoped to extend this to the weekends soon. We're grateful to all those who helped us by contributing their time and money to this achievement. The gardens have really been
That is the end of part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 2. Part 3. You will hear 2 psychology students discussing the effects of the order in which the children in a family are born. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Ed, how are you getting on with the reading for our presentation next week?
Well, okay, Ruth, but there's so much of it.
I know. I hadn't realised birth order was such a popular area of research.
But the stuff on birth order and personality is mostly unreliable. From what I've been reading, a lot of the claims about how your position in the family determines certain personality traits are just stereotypes, with no robust evidence to support them.
OK, but that's an interesting point. We could start by outlining what previous research has shown. There are studies going back over 100 years.
Yeah, so we could just run through some of the typical traits. Like the consensus seems to be that oldest children are generally less well-adjusted because they never get over the arrival of a younger sibling.
Right, but on a positive note, some studies claim that they were thought to be good at nurturing. Certainly in the past, when people had large families, they would have been expected to look after the younger ones.
There isn't such a clear picture for middle children, but one trait that a lot of the studies mention is that they are easier to get on with than older or younger siblings.
Generally eager to please and helpful, although that's certainly not accurate as far as my family goes. My middle brother was a nightmare, always causing fights and envious of whatever I had.
As I said, none of this seems to relate to my own experience. I'm the youngest in my family, and I don't recognise myself in any of the studies I've read about. I'm supposed to have been a sociable and confident child who made friends easily, but I was actually terribly shy.
Really? That's funny. There have been hundreds of studies on twins, but mostly about nurture versus nature.
There was one on personality which said that a twin is likely to be quite shy in social situations because they always have their twin around to depend on for support.
My cousins were like that when they were small. They were only interested in each other and found it hard to engage with other kids. They're fine now, though.
Only children have had a really bad press. A lot of studies have branded them as loners who think the world revolves around them because they've never had to fight for their parents' attention.
That does seem a bit harsh. One category I hadn't considered before was children with much older siblings. A couple of studies mentioned that these children grow up more quickly and are expected to do basic things for themselves, like getting dressed.
I can see how that might be true, although I expect they're sometimes the exact opposite, playing the baby role and clamouring for special treatment.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
What was the problem with most of these studies, do you think?
I think it was because, in a lot of cases, data was collected from only one sibling per family, who rated him or herself and his or her siblings at the same time.
Some of the old research into the relationship between birth order and academic achievement has been proved to be accurate, though. Performances in intelligence tests decline slightly from the eldest child to his or her younger siblings. This has been proved in lots of recent studies.
Yes, although what many of them didn't take into consideration was family size. The more siblings there are, the likelier the family is to have a low socio-economic status, which can also account for differences between siblings in academic performance.
The oldest boy might be given more opportunities than his younger sisters, for example.
Exactly.
But the main reason for the marginally higher academic performance of oldest children is quite surprising, I think. It's not only that they benefit intellectually from extra attention at a young age, which is what I would have expected. It's that they benefit from being teachers for their younger siblings by verbalising processes.
Right. And this gives them status and confidence, which again contributes in a small way to better performance. So, would you say sibling rivalry has been a useful thing for you?
I think so. My younger brother was incredibly annoying, and we fought a lot. But I think this has made me a stronger person. I know how to defend myself. We had some terrible arguments, and I would have died rather than apologise to him. But we had to put up with each other, and most of the time we coexisted amicably enough.
Yes, my situation was pretty similar. But I don't think having two older brothers made me any less selfish. I was never prepared to let my brothers use any of my stuff.
That's perfectly normal, whereas sometimes...
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3.
Okay, so we've been looking at the attitudes of various social and cultural groups towards the management of their personal finances, how important they feel it is to save money, and what they save their money for. One aspect that we haven't yet considered is gender. So if we consider gender issues, we're basically asking whether men and women have different attitudes towards saving money, and whether they save money for different things. Back in 1928, the British writer George Bernard Shaw wrote in his Intelligent Women's Guide to Socialism and Capitalism that a man is supposed to understand politics, economics, and finance, and is therefore unwilling to accept essential instruction. He also said, a woman, having fewer pretensions, is far more willing to learn. Now, though these days people might question a lot of the assumptions contained in those statements, recent research does suggest that there are some quite fundamental differences between men and women in their attitudes to economic matters. Let's look at what men and women actually save for. Research studies of women in North America have found that women are far more likely to save for their children's education, and they are also more likely to save up in order to buy a house one day. The same studies have found that men, on the other hand, tend to save for a car, which, by the way, takes a surprisingly large amount of the household budget in North America. But the other main priority for men when saving money is their retirement. When they're earning, they're far more likely to put money aside for their old age than women are. Now, this is rather disturbing, because, in fact, the need for women to save for their old age is far greater than for men. Let's consider this for a moment. To start with, it is a fact that throughout the world, women are likely to live many years longer than men, so they need money to support them during this time. Since women are likely to be the ones left without a partner in old age, they may therefore have to pay for nursing care, because they don't have a spouse to look after them. Furthermore, the high divorce rates in North America are creating a poverty cycle for women. It is the divorced women who will most often have to look after the children, and thus they need more money to look after not just themselves, but others. So what can be done about this situation? The population in North America is likely to contain an increasing number of elderly women. The research indicates that at present, for women, it takes a crisis to make them think about their future financial situation. But of course, this is the very worst time for anyone to make important decisions. Women today need to look ahead, think ahead, not wait until they're under pressure. Even women in their early 20s need to think about pensions, for example, and with increasing numbers of women in professional positions, there are signs that this is beginning to happen. Then research also suggests that women avoid dealing effectively with their economic situation because of a lack of confidence. The best way for them to overcome this is by getting themselves properly informed so they are less dependent on other people's advice. A number of initiatives have been set up to help them do this. This college, for example, is one of the educational institutions which offers night classes in money management, and increasing numbers of women are enrolling on such courses. Here, they can be given advice on different ways of saving. Many women are unwilling to invest in stocks and shares, for instance, but these can be extremely profitable. It is usually advised that at least 70% of a person's savings should be in low-risk investments. But for the rest, financial advisors often advise taking some well-informed risks. Initiatives such as this can give women the economic skills and knowledge they need for a comfortable, independent retirement. The increasing proportion of elderly women in the population is likely to have other economic consequences.